Hey, e-bikers, if you spend as much time as I do watching e-bikes on YouTube, well, you probably know my next guest today. Micah Toll is the intrepid reporter for Electrek, covering the micromobility space, and he's also the founder of ebikeschool.com. He's got some time today out in San Francisco while he's covering an event. And Micah, thanks for taking some time out today. Really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me on. It should be fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been watching your stuff for years. I got my first burning question though, Mike, is, and this is what I think everybody wants to know. Do you own any other clothes besides black t-shirts and jeans?
Excellent question. So I do have a couple civilian outfits, so to speak. It's funny because when I made one of my first videos, I don't know, it must have been like at least 10 years ago or something. I was wearing a black shirt. My wife was like, "Oh, that looks nice on you." And I was like, "Huh, well, maybe that would be like a good, sort of like every filming outfit." Also, I kind of liked the way like cartoon characters, they wear the same thing and you just
Yep.
kind of like you get used to it and it's like their look. So I thought, if it works for cartoon characters, maybe it'll work for me.
Nice. So we can thank your wife for the uniform there. Awesome. I also want to. I have a very. I was watching your video on the which is one of my most memorable ones for you, which is the kayak and the jackrabbit, where you did the camping expedition. I give you a lot of credit on that one, man. That was pretty challenging there. I wasn't sure you were gonna do it there.
Thank you. Yeah, that one was it was actually a little hairier than it looked, I think, in the video.
Oh
There were
yeah.
multiple spots where it was like, I think this is gonna go bad quickly. And I don't know how I kept that thing above water the whole time because I mean the Jackrabbit's pretty small, but that was the biggest Jackrabbit at the time, the XG
Yeah.
Pro. And it was a lot of weight out on the bow of that kayak. And so, I literally had like 2 inches of freeboard and I was worried I was gonna sink that kayak a couple of times when the swells got a bit bigger.
Yeah, that's classic, man. That's a keeper for sure.
Thank
So,
you.
how'd you get started in all this, man? Give us what's the background story here?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you the short one so I don't ramble too much. But it's been a little while. So I first like wanted to motorize a bike. I think it was back in 2008. I was in
Wow.
engineering school and I didn't want to have a car in the city. Like it seemed like too much, but a bicycle is just tough to get around quickly, like a pedal bike. And so I actually started by taking like a weed whacker engine and putting it on the back of a bike. And it worked, but it wasn't very elegant. I went like 30 miles an hour, but it was crazy loud. And I was, mixing up
Right.
like oil and gasoline, like just not a good situation. So while it worked, I was talking to a friend of mine in the machine shop that we both worked in at the engineering school, and he was like, they've really come a long way with some of these electric motors. Like I think it might work for a bike. And I was like, huh, interesting. So we started like going down that rabbit hole, and I discovered that like, yeah, I mean, even back then, and it was like 2008 or 2009, like there were already some decent hub motors out there,
Mm.
and so I started on a an e-bike back then, and then once we started playing around with it, we were like, I think there might be something to this because, you could build an e-bike back then, but if you wanted to buy one, there weren't very many options. I think around something like 2009 or so, juiced bikes came out. Maybe it was a little bit earlier. Pedigo was available, but that was
Mhm.
largely it. And so we started working on trying to build a company around this that like we can build e-bikes ourselves, but what if we made like a retail e-bike? And so I brought in a couple of guys that I worked with there in the machine shop that were engineering students with me, and we started a company and we were actually building a new type of mid-drive. This was like years before Bafang BBSO2 and stuff like that, and so
Hmm.
we were trying to build something like nicer than a hub motor. We got some decent funding, but then the night before we were going to sign the deal, it fell apart a little bit with like I think some of the stress on the team from like accepting that large of an investment. And so unfortunately, the after a couple of years of like really good work and some pretty nice development, the startup fell apart.
Wow.
But I was left with all of this like knowledge and experience with e-bikes and nothing really to do with it. So that's when I wrote a book about building e-bikes because I figured, hey, like I know this stuff, why don't I just try and share it? And then I started the e-bike school site and YouTube channel to also just like do something with this because I felt like it would be a waste if I learned all this stuff and like it ended right there. So
Yeah.
with nothing else to do, I just started sharing what I had learned, and from there it kind of snowballed, and the website and the YouTube channel started growing. After several years of that, Electrek found me from the YouTube channel, so I joined Electrek as well. And so in parallel, I helped them build up their YouTube channel, which was pretty. I think it was like 5,000 subscribers when I start, so that grew significantly. And they brought me in to add e-bike coverage because they were largely a Tesla site, back in, I think I joined in 2017.
Back in those
Um,
days.
yeah, and so I helped them, flesh out their micromobility coverage, and it's just sort of, yeah, it's snowballed from there.
Nice. What year did you join Electrek?
Think it was 27, was it 2017 or 2018, something like that.
So you've been there, what, 8 years now? Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yep. What was the name of your startup?
It was called Pulse Motors.
Pulse Motor. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to see some interesting looking e-bikes,
It's on YouTube
Google
somewhere?
Pulse Motors. Yeah,
Okay.
it might be on YouTube. I think the site might still be up. There are a few news articles out there. Our first run of bikes, they were hub motor based, and also we had significant body panels on them because our goal in the beginning was to sell advertising to local companies
Oh,
as a way to like earn early revenue to like fund the R&D while we were developing our mid-drive system. And so they had significant body panel coverage for the purpose of running local ads on them. So they look a bit kind of funny compared to
yeah.
today's e-bikes.
Yep. How many e-bikes do you own right now?
Oh man, several. It's a bit of a revolving door.
Yeah.
I,
Where do you
I
keep them all
think
to? I know you travel a lot. So,
Yeah, so I keep them in multiple places, but oh sorry, let me silence my phone here. Um so I think so. I have several bikes. I don't necessarily ride all of them all the time, but I definitely have like my go-to sort of daily driver bikes. Um, I think my favorite one is probably my Priority Current Plus. That's like my nicest, like I really want to enjoy this ride kind of bike. I also have my my Electrek XP4, my Jackrabbit OG, which is just like sort of a fun, like weird little thing, especially if like I'm going somewhere that I need to bring it in with me. It doesn't take up much space.
mhm.
And then my Rad Mission is like my sort of beater bike. It's like 5 years old at this
Oh,
point,
that thing.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's I mean, it's still a great bike. Like, it works great. It's on its original battery, nice simple single speed. And I usually take it places when I know I need to lock my bike outside, and like it's my cheapest bike, so I don't really worry too much. I mean, I don't want it to get stolen, but if it does, I'm not gonna cry the same way that if my Priority Current Plus got stolen, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So
Speaking of Rad, what's
yeah.
going on with them? I saw the news. Um,
Yeah.
they're still selling
Yeah.
bikes on the site. Just checked. So maybe they're waiting till the
So
Christmas season and then they're gonna close up shop.
yeah, I mean, all we know from now is that they've said that they may close in January, like nothing's final. So until then, like I think they need to keep selling bikes and keep trying to, find a
Yeah.
buyer or a partner, or merge or something. They're looking for some way to save the company.
Oh yeah.
So like they're, technically still operational. It's just they filed that WARN notice, which you have to in the state of Washington if you're going to be terminating employees. So what they basically said is that like if nothing changes by January, 2 months from now, then they'll basically be closing up shop. So yeah, it's really unfortunate because they were like, not the first e-bike company in the US, but certainly one of the first to grow to a scale that really brought e-bikes to the forefront. They were a lot of people's first e-bike, and so
Yeah.
it's unfortunate to see the way that's gone.
Yeah. I got a few of my Connecticut group here I ride with, and so some rads and stuff out there. It's been a tough year for the e-bike industry overall, right? I mean, we lost Electric Bike Company, we lost Juiced early in the year, though it's coming back. Yeah, just talk about that bit if you could in terms of what's happened this year and why, if you could. Is it really the tariffs? Is that the main reason?
Yeah, so I think there are several reasons. And I'm not even sure it's just this year. I think the last 2 to 3 years have
Yeah.
been getting progressively worse, or if not worsening, then just been, we've been in this sort of dip of the graph for a while after that big pandemic boom. I know in Rad's case, it was a combination of factors that didn't necessarily affect everyone the same way. For Rad, they had just such a huge workforce. I mean, at one time they were over 1,000 employees, which,
Yeah, that's crazy.
right? Like, I don't know how an e-bike company can support over a
Electric has like a
thousand.
hundred, I think, something like that, So
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just an incredible number of employees to keep on payroll. Now, at that time, they were doing something like, 200, $300 million a year in sales. So, they were projecting that kind of continued growth, which of course didn't happen.
How many bikes is that per year? Is it like a couple
I
hundred
think
thousand or?
Yeah, so I mean, if you assume that back then their average price was around 1,500 or so, you'd be looking at like 200,000 bikes. Now it was less than that because obviously each sale is going to come with some accessories and this and that, but they were probably doing over 100,000, maybe 150,000 bikes annually at that peak back then, like 2021-ish kind of thing during the pandemic. But they also they stockpiled a ton of parts because you remember like the supply chain issues back then. It was hard for companies to get stuff, and so Rad had a lot of buying power, and so they said like we're just gonna like create like a war chest of components. And so I think they still have significant overstock of a lot of components they bought years ago, and so that
Hmm.
was a big issue for them as well. But for all companies, I mean, everyone's facing tariffs. They were a bit off and on over the last few years. There were the tariff exclusions, and they snapped back several times. So, it was a bunch of whiplash. In the past year, they've gotten worse, of course, and so that's put extra pressure. E-bikes have unfortunately sort of like faded from their pandemic heyday when they were really seen as like the best alternative. Whether it was people trying to like get out of crowded public transportation for health reasons, or whether it's people were off of either they're working from home or they were off work for several months since they were just looking for something to do, get out. There's that huge push for e-bikes that we don't necessarily have as much now. So that's hitting a lot of companies. Not that e-bikes aren't selling, they are, but it doesn't have the huge pandemic push that it once had. And of course, there's just a ton of competition from Chinese companies coming in. A lot of them that are kind of skirting the rules on tariffs, or that sort of playing with an unfair advantage there, which is definitely hard for a lot of the U.S. based companies to compete with.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of China, you've been over there a lot, going to these factories and things like that. What's that experience like as just an outsider? Like, talk about that a bit if you could.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've been to China, I think, 3 times now, and I've traveled through, I don't know, 15 factories or so maybe. So it's pretty interesting to see, like I'm not an expert on Chinese manufacturing or anything, but I've seen a decently wide range, and from the, super low tech to the super high tech is just really interesting to see, what they can do on the low end. You've got people, like welding without a mask and just kind of like doing the safety squints or looking
Mhm.
away. On the high end, you've got robotic welders that don't even have humans in the assembly line.
Yep.
And so it's just an incredibly interesting process to watch.
Do
And
they give you kind of like free access there? Are they monitoring you a bit, or like curating the experience for you at all? Or
Yeah, a lot of people wonder about that. A lot of people. So I did a video where I went to China. I think it was like the 8 factories in 8 days video. And
Mhm.
so many people accused me of either being like a government plant, or like of having government minders that take me around. And so if I can use this as a chance to set the record straight, it was an entirely private trip. Nothing was like organized through the government. I did not have any minders. The only government employees I saw the whole time were on the way in and out stamping my passport. So in each factory, it's a little different. Like each time I would reach out to a factory and ask, like, can I come visit, that sort of thing. And the ones that said, sure, we'd love to host you. Usually they would give me what's effectively like a tour guide. But if I said like, can I go here? Can I go there? They're always like, yeah, sure. Sometimes you can't look like behind that door kind of thing. I think they were just like excited for the opportunity to share things. Obviously, they had their like sort of pre-planned route. They wanted to show me this, that, whatever. But I was certainly interested in, walking away from the beaten path a little bit. So I never felt like, I had minders, or that I was being like fed propaganda. Now, of course, I saw what they wanted me to see. So like, if there was something that they didn't want me to see, I'm sure they made sure like it wasn't in the factory that day. So, you got to understand that I'm seeing it through their lens, but I was never like, not permitted to show things, or stuff like that.
yeah. Did you do a video where one worker was like napping it under their desk or something? One of yours
I saw many napping at their desks.
at the
I
desk.
don't know if I ever saw one under their desk, but
I saw a video. Yeah, basically
yeah.
they're literally under the desk on like a little bed. Do
Yeah,
they work like
that I
a
haven't
ton of
seen.
hours over there, or like what's their work schedule like? Those.
Yeah, they do have a pretty tough work schedule. Now, again, it varies factory to factory, but in general, the culture is one of pretty long hours. Now, in addition, they have sort of like the, Spanish siesta thing, where like after lunch, pretty much everyone will sort of
Oh,
like take a nap for an hour. And that's why like one of the times I think I shared in the video, like as I was going through the factory tour, I just asked if I can go off to the restroom, and so I got a bit lost in the offices finding the restroom. And I walked through in a like an employee area, and that's where everyone was just like asleep at their desk. It was right after lunch. And that was like a cool thing to see because yeah, it's like in the office they turn off the lights, and either people literally like bring a pillow or like an airline pillow, and they kind of like, sleep at their desk, or some of them are just like,
like
hands
daycare
down
for
on their
work.
phone. Yeah, exactly. And in the fact, so those were the office workers, right? It's like, customer service and the engineers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
On the factory floor, at each of the assembly lines, there were these racks of yoga mats, and that like confused me at first. But when I asked about it, my guide said, "Oh yeah, that's for like during the after lunch like rest time. It's so that if they want, they all have a yoga mat and they can just like lay it down and take a nap." So so yeah, they definitely work longer hours, but it doesn't seem like it's, at least in the factories I was in, that it's like forced labor or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Like it seems like, they get pretty good conditions. One of the factories I was in, like they all had personal air conditioners at the assembly line, that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they work hard. That's pretty obvious there. But what about their customer service? That's a big complaint of buyers over here in the U.S. about a lot of these companies and their customer service. Why can't they get better at that, do you think?
Yeah, so I guess it depends sort of like which type of company you're looking at, right? Because you've got like the Chinese e-bike companies, and then you've got the sort of US Chinese companies, where they're US companies that sell Chinese bikes, or nowadays like most of them are produced in Vietnam or some of the other countries. And they've moved a
Yeah, I
lot
think
of that
Electrek
production
is doing
out.
some Vietnam production now too. So
Exactly. Yeah. So like for the Chinese companies, I think they just underestimate how important that is to a US customer. They're very sales oriented, not after sales oriented. And so they just don't have a lot of support available. Or if they do, it's fairly untrained workers, that perhaps don't understand your bike as well as you do, kind of thing, which can be
mm,
frustrating. When it comes to the US based companies, Electrek, Rad, RIP, Ride One Up, those kinds of companies, they certainly do a better job, but still, there are a lot of complaints about customer service, legitimate complaints. And I
yeah,
think that the issue there is a lot of these companies underestimate how much they need to scale their customer service as they grow. So, like Rad definitely had that issue because they grew at such a huge pace, and they outpaced their customer service. So they worked to increase their workforce there, which, again, like part of the problem was having so many people on payroll. But they admitted to some failures there. I think their CEO a couple years ago, Phil, actually like sent out a letter to the community that was like, we've messed up and we need to do better on customer service. Um, for companies like Electric, I think they've done a pretty good job. Now, I still hear complaints about, I mean, any bike company, if you go on
yeah,
and you search like,
yeah. If you go on the
customer
Facebook
service
groups, you'll
problem.
find a complaint for anybody. It's inevitable.
Yeah. But generally, I think Electric has done a pretty good job. And yeah, like if you've ever been in their like like open office there,
Yeah, I have.
a huge portion you've seen is customer service. Like so
Yeah,
many of those desks there are their customer service team. So they've done a really good job trying to keep up the staff that's necessary. It also seems like they do a pretty good job of actually making sure their customer service team knows about the bikes. Like they all get on the bikes, they have them, they ride
yeah.
them.
They've got a
Like,
wall there with all the parts of each bike. You can just go look and say, okay, I need to replace this part or this. So
exactly. Yeah. So I think, some companies like that, they've really made a concerted effort, and in some cases it's paid off quite well. Whether they, if they answer the emails quickly enough, not all of them have phone support, that kind of stuff. I'm sure it can always be improved, but I think it's a matter of making sure you scale your customer service as your number of bikes grows. Otherwise, your email ticket list is just
yeah,
gonna,
you're asking
get
for
longer
trouble.
and
Yeah,
longer. And are your customer service reps actually knowledgeable about the products, or do they just have their list of questions that when you ask, they go through and they try to match to the question in the book? And so I think those are the two things that really separate companies on customer service.
definitely. Let's talk about laws and regulations a bit. So here in Connecticut, where I live, Mike, they just passed some new laws. I want to run this by you too, and get your thoughts and stuff. But so class one and two, you have to be 16. You got to wear a helmet, of course. Now, I think if you're under 16, you can't ride a class three. I think, but you have to wear a helmet. Everyone has to wear a helmet. If it's over class three, so if it's over 750 watts but below 3,700 watts, it's now considered a quote motor driven cycle, which you have to have a driver's license to do. So I have a bike I just got that has a 3,000 watt motor. So that's a motor driven cycle now, even though it looks like an e-bike. And if you're over 3,700 watts, you have to have a motorcycle registration. I think that's a pretty good way to structure it all. Now that we're seeing all these big bikes with 10K kilowatt motors sometimes, what is your standard as far as when an e-bike becomes a motorcycle?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure there's a right answer because it's such a gray area in between. I do think that the way we have our class three set up, or our three classes set up, I should say, is a good start. Um, what I hate to see is when we start limiting performance to levels that prevent people from using e-bikes or just turn them off from the idea, like the New York City system where they limited to 15 miles per hour, which is like even a little bit less than the European laws, which are already pretty restrictive. So that I think is an issue. When it comes to sort of delineating now, where do we start motorcycle territory? I think what we started with the three class system is an excellent start. Um, the difference between 20 and 28 miles per hour is certainly appreciable. Like it sounds like it's only 8 miles per hour, but like if you look at the kinetic energy of those bikes, the difference is almost double in terms of how much energy you're moving during while going full speed on those bikes. So um, when there are some restrictions on class three e-bikes, whether it's not allowing kids under 16, that sort of thing, I think um, I think it's legitimate. And as long as they're designed to protect people and not limit bike usage, I'm okay with that. Above 28 miles per hour, like the Connecticut law, where it creates this motor driven cycle, I think that there's something to work with there. I've long felt like we need a class four
Yeah,
uh,
me too.
system. Yeah, because there are so many bikes that they do slip somewhat past the class three limits, but I'm not sure I would call them motorcycles yet.
Right.
That someone would need to go through like a full motorcycle licensing course to ride one of these seems a bit excessive. So I would love to see that we create some, class three, or sorry, class four that goes up to like, maybe 35 miles per hour, maybe 40. I mean, we got to figure out the right limit here, and does have more restrictions. Maybe you do need to be 18. This isn't, meant for high school kids to be going 40 miles per hour. But maybe there are also some higher safety requirements, legit turn signals, a lot of the stuff that goes into motorcycle regulations to make them safer, that sort of thing. But it allows people to have a vehicle that isn't as massive, that isn't as heavily regulated. Maybe you don't need the insurance. Maybe there's a very simple, 1 day class that you do because you don't need to learn everything you need to know for motorcycling. Though I do recommend for everyone that, if they have the time and have the curiosity to actually take a motorcycle course, because even for e-bike riders, I think it adds a lot. But I do think that a class four system would be really good in the US because we've demonstrated how useful e-bikes are, especially the faster ones. So many people prefer class three because it allows them to keep up with traffic on
Yeah.
US roads where we just don't have as good cycling infrastructure. If the US was the Netherlands, then I would say you probably don't need anything over class three, but it's not. And if riders are going to be keeping up with traffic on larger roads, then
Yeah, it's like
having something.
it's like we have to ride on the road. If we're gonna have to ride on the road, we need something that is safe for us. It can't just be a moving target for these cars.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that if we had something in between there, that we didn't just say anything over class three as a motorcycle, I think that would be a big improvement. But I do think we need to do it in a safe way, both to protect riders and to protect pedestrians and pedal cyclists that don't want to be getting buzzed by a 40-mile-per-hour electric bike in the bike lane. Because I think that's also a legitimate concern. When I ride either a pedal bike, or sometimes I ride my e-bikes with the battery off, if just like I want to get a little extra exercise, then I hate when someone passes me at 35 miles an hour on an e-bike in the bike lane. So I totally get it. We gotta make sure things are safe for all road users.
Yeah, there was a crazy story, it was a freak story in Cape Cod this year where a woman got impaled by an e-biker on the Cape Cod Rail Trail. And now she's calling for a complete ban of all e-bikes on the trail, which is, I understand the severity of the injury and stuff like that. I guess they had to call like the jaws of life for this thing because it was impaled in her face or something. And it's stories like
Geez.
that that are really gonna just hurt the e-bike riding experience, I think, over time. But I was on a last month, a local reporter was doing a story on e-bikes, so a friend of mine set it up, and we brought her down. We actually took her on a little ride and showed her the benefits of riding an e-bike to try and get our version of why we ride e-bikes into the atmosphere there, and hopefully try and change people's minds, things like that. For because right now it's all just negative, like people are banning e-bikes everywhere, and it's we need to have that voice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there also needs to be a balance in media because like
Yeah,
while accidents like that are awful and they shouldn't happen, if every time that the jaws of life were called out for a car accident, we talked about should we ban cars, then we would be looking at this transportation issue a lot differently. So there needs to be a balance in reporting as well, which I think it's unfortunate that e-bikes get scapegoated for problems when most of the problems are not caused by e-bikes.
exactly. Amen. Let's talk about something. What do you think of the new Rivian e-bike announcement, the TMB, I guess it's called? Pretty interesting in terms of what they're doing there.
Yeah, I think I might be in the minority opinion here, perhaps an unpopular opinion, but I don't think it's going to be a success. I think it's going to be quite a failure,
Hmm.
not as a bike, but as a company. I don't think that also is going to be able to make it with this product. Now, let me let me back up a little bit and say that the bike itself, the
That's a bold
product,
statement.
I think is incredible. Yeah, and uh, nothing against the engineers. They deserve a lot of credit for creating a really cool machine there.
Yeah,
But as someone, so I have both an engineering and a business background. As an engineer, I love the thing. As an MBA, I can't see them making a profit and surviving as a company. I mean, the bike for what it does is just too expensive for the American consumer, right? Like it's going to be a low volume product. Now
yeah,
it's awesome the things they've designed, the technology that's built into there, the pedal by wire, the profiles, the swappable top frame. There's so many cool things in there, but American e-bike customers, by and large, ask three questions: how far, how fast, how much? And on all three of those metrics, Rivian's bike doesn't stack up well against $1,000 e-bike. Anything from the Ride One Up Portola, Electrek XP4, all these bikes that are not as good bikes, but that on a performance metric go just as fast, just as
it's
far,
far
and
for
cost a
less.
quarter of the price. And so when I look at it from that perspective, while I love how cool the bike is and what they've designed into it, I can't see it selling very high volume. And based on that, I can't see the company surviving past the point where Rivian says, like, all right, we got to stop floating them millions of dollars. Because it's not just the product, right? The company, they've got a ton of employees, but they're hiring like crazy. Like if you look at their job boards, they've got a ton of open positions for
Also does.
technology. Yeah, also. So they've
Mm,
got a ton of open technology positions. They've got a ton of engineers on staff. And again, like they're building awesome stuff. Like hats off to them. But they're going to be, payroll must be huge for the company.
yeah,
And I don't know how long they can float like that without making significant income on bikes because they have to be doing pretty low volume with those bikes. Like, $4,500 e-bikes just don't sell very high volume in the US. We've seen multiple high-end e-bike companies leave the US market. Recent Molar paused for a while. Yamaha's out of the US market. I wouldn't be surprised if more just leave the US market because these high-end bikes don't sell the way they do in Europe. Now, if also can do good volume in Europe, then maybe there's a chance. And then if
yeah,
they're commercial vehicles, if they can get Amazon to buy 10,000 of those quads, then maybe there's some good money there. But as much as the bike is a fascinating look at what is possible, I don't think that it's going to be a commercial success.
yeah, yeah. Car companies and e-bikes don't really have a good track record. Let's say, like, I saw the Ford Mustang e-bike last year. That thing's like 4 grand, and it's just a 750 watt hub motor with a cool frame essentially, you know. So it's just a
Yep.
status symbol.
Yeah. GM has tried. Ford has tried.
Mercedes,
Hummer.
Porsche.
Yeah.
I think Porsche has one too, I think.
Yeah. Porsche is interesting because they've gone about it a little bit differently. They've bought up several e-bike companies and drive makers.
Oh
And
yeah.
so they've they've brought in some good expertise and they've bought like functional companies as opposed to either trying to develop something entirely in-house, which is expensive, which is what like GM did with the Arrive and what Also is doing right now, or Rivian is doing it also. But they've also avoided just going like the Mercedes or the Ducati route and just like slapping their name on a bike, you know, and doing like a licensing deal. So um, Porsche has done like an interesting route there. I don't know that they'll be successful yet, but they're at least trying something slightly innovative. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. A couple more questions for you, Mike, and we certainly appreciate your time today again. The Micah Toll constants. My buddy Matt over Electric All Wheel loves to quote you on this. He's a big engineer too. So, can you explain what that is for the audience and tell us about that?
Yeah, so I guess like I kind of landed a while ago on this 25 watt hour per mile figure. And to me, that is sort of the best way to judge how far a bike is going to go for an average rider in an average situation. And obviously, you know, it varies a bit depending on rider weight and terrain and fat tires and all that kind of stuff. But I kept landing somewhere around 25 watt hours per mile. And so to me, that's like the simplest way I recommend people figure out e-bike range because manufacturers will list, you know, crazy numbers from, 20 to 200 miles. And like you never really know what that means. So what I found is that when I'm doing mostly throttle riding, going mostly like 20-ish miles per hour, I'm getting 25 watt hours per mile. So if I've got a 500 watt hour battery divided by 25 watt hours per mile, that means it's a 20-mile e-bike. What I found is that generally speaking, if I'm doing pedal assist, it's closer to 15 watt hours per mile. So those are sort
15.
of like
Okay.
the two constants that I
Hmm.
use. And again, like this varies considerably. If you're a heavy rider, if you've got, fat tires, especially that you're running on lower pressure, if you're riding on sand, all these things are going to cause you to do more than 25 watt hours per mile. Maybe you bump up to 30, 35, that sort of thing. So it's not an exact science for everyone, but I found that it's a good rough indicator for most people that covers most styles of riding. And so
Yeah.
that's what I've generally recommended to people, especially that are, new to the industry and don't know that you can't just take manufacturers' range ratings at face value. That like, those are very lofty figures for most companies. Some are a little more honest, but for most companies, if it says it's a 500 watt hour battery and they're telling you it's going to go 90 miles, then like, no, unless you're in pedal assist level one with a tailwind going downhill, you're not going to get 90 miles. So that's sort of the 25 watt hour per mile constant I've landed on.
Matt also wanted to know at what voltage does the constant become impractical? He asks.
Well, it's not super voltage dependent because that's the nice thing about using watt hours is that they're a bit independent of voltage. And that's also why I don't like to compare amp hours either because amp hours like doesn't really matter because it's only comparable between the same voltage batteries. So, like if you're on a 72 volt bike, if it's a 10 amp hour battery, then you're still doing you still got 720 watt hours. That would be the same as like a 48 volt, 15 amp hour bike. So that bike, if you're doing 20 miles per hour, take that 72 volt bike. Like I think you just reviewed recently, the Escape.
Escape Ranger, yeah.
Uh, exactly. Yes, that was 72 volts, right?
Yep.
So if you're doing 20 miles per hour on that bike, which, you'd be tempted to do
2,500 watt hours, yeah.
more. Yeah. No, but I'm saying if you're doing 25 miles per hour, then let's say you're doing 20, like the class two limit, right? So let's say you're doing 20 miles per hour, you're basically going to be using the same power level as a 48 volt bike doing 20 miles per hour, as long as they've got similar controllers, that sort of thing. Now, if you're going uphill on a much heavier bike, you might be pulling a little more power, but all things equal, and you're just comparing battery voltage, it's not going to significantly impact your energy draw as long as you're comparing at the same speed. If you're doing 40 miles per hour on that bike, now that 25 watt hour per mile constant has gone out the window. So that's where
Yeah.
things change is really speed based. But just because the pack is at a higher voltage won't really impact your efficiency as long as you're keeping it at sort of comparable performance levels and not using the super high end that those 72 volt bikes are capable of.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks. I think I put it in ChatGPT and it came out with 20 watt hours as the constant, but That's what AI thinks anyway.
Yeah, well, another reason that, don't always take ChatGPT at face value, just like e-bike companies.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, man. Let's start to wrap this up. E-bikes for good. That's a pretty good little program you got going on. How many bikes have you given away over the years?
It's a good question. I haven't kept track exactly, but I would guess somewhere around like 20 to 25 maybe. So I have it, I give away an e-bike at the end of each video, and I've been doing about a video a month on Ebike School for a while now. And so, yeah, I'd guess probably around a couple dozen or so.
Nice.
But I
What
should
kind of
probably keep
give me one
track.
example of like a story that someone wrote in to get a bike? Like, what did they tell you?
It's been all sorts of things, from people that have, been in awful car accidents, and they lost their only car, and now they've got health issues because of it, and so it's sort of a double whammy. They need a way to get back to health, and they don't have a way to get around. People that have issues with mobility, so like they literally can't ride a pedal bike, they have trouble walking, that sort of thing. um, there was one that, and lots of times, like when I read these things, I mean, they're just incredibly touching.
Tragic,
Like
yeah.
I've cried multiple times reading these entries. That's why I make it a random drawing also. Like I go through and because I don't want to be like, choosing who's the most deserving, because there's so many
Yeah,
deserving
that's hard.
people. But
Yeah.
like I go through and I find the ones that are like legitimate stories, not someone that's just like, hey, I'd love a bike. And then of those, I do a random number generator, and it's random. But yeah, there have been some that have just been so, um, you know, just tug at your heartstrings. There was one that, there's this person that they and their partner had actually had to leave their town because they were part of the LGBT community, and they were having a lot of harassment. They didn't feel they were safe, so they left town. They were in a new area. They both had gotten jobs, which was good, but they were very low income. One of them had a pedal bike, and the other one didn't have a way to get to work, so they walked. And so they ended up winning. They were the randomly chosen entrant, but um, like it caused me to like feel something so much that I think it was Electrek XP light that was given away that time. I just bought another light, and I sent it with them, including the one that Electrek donated, which was really generous of them, so they would both have bikes and be able to ride together. Because the first one, they said they had like a really just sort of like crappy beater bike that worked, but I wanted them to be able to like have something because life was so tough for them. So
Yeah.
like, after that, they sent me a whole bunch of pictures. They were riding together all the time. They were in the park. They both had a way to get to work that was much more convenient, and wasn't as difficult anymore. And it's just like so many stories that I never would have expected, and that's kind of like the point. That's why I wanted to create that program, was because if I have access to all these bikes, and I can help people that don't have that same access, but that need the bike, because of any, not no fault of their own, but just because of life circumstances, like that's what I wanted to do. And so I just can't believe all the different stories I've heard, and all the people that can be helped by e-bikes. And if anything, like I almost feel bad because, like I'm glad that I've helped people, but each time I see all the people that I didn't get to help, right? Like, I go through so many entrants, and only one person gets a bike from each video. And like, it's tough realizing how many people out there need this, this like transportation independence that can't get it.
It's
So
amazing the freedom it gives you. I mean, that's why I hooked on it so much, I
absolutely.
think. It's just I've seen more Connecticut than ever on my e-bike than I did in the car. It's just been all across the Northeast and ridden everywhere. So it's such a liberating feeling riding it.
Absolutely. I agree.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll end on that note. Micah, appreciate your time. What are you working on next? Any new videos?
I think I have like 10 videos shot that need editing right now. So I have a lot of
What's your
things.
next crazy Chinese purchase you're working on?
I've got a couple electric tractors that I've got a video part edited, an electric ATV truck thing, got this cool candy golf cart I'm working on, several e-bikes. Um, yeah,
Candy
it's
golf cart? Like,
yeah, I can't
oh,
KANDI, not
candy. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, not the sweet candy. But yeah, part of their NFL series. So
Yeah.
I filmed in a Miami Dolphins golf cart, and so got my family to join me with that one. So that was a fun one. So I've got a bunch of videos in the editing hopper. It's tough because like the fun part is going out and filming everything, and then you sit down
Yeah.
at the computer and you're like, oh, I have hours editing all this. So yeah, it's
Welcome to YouTube life, right?
right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a lot in the hopper.
Awesome, man. Well, tell the audience where to follow you or throughout your channels. What do you want them to know?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to check out my videos, I'm on YouTube at both Ebike School and at Electrek. And then I also write for electrek.co. So you can find my stuff sort of in a bunch of different places. So if you guys want to check it out, that'd be awesome. And thank you so much, Chris, for having me on. This has been fun, and it's great to talk shop. I love talking about
Ah,
e-bikes and
man,
stuff.
this is
So
a special treat for me, man. I've been following you for years, and it's great to chat with you here virtually. Anyway,
well, I was glad to share it with you.
awesome. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching, and can I see Micah for Micah first time, and we'll see you next time on Crisscross, guys. I'm out.